Hi, everybody. It's Martha Creek, marthacreek.com to contact me directly. There's also plenty of this podcast and other videos and everything that are there offered at no charge. My idea is to get empowered teachings to the whole of the planet. And this mentoring moments with Martha episodes are for that. So today I'm absolutely blessed to have a soul brother, the Reverend Ric Beattie from up in Unity of Royal Oak in Michigan with me. And we'll be knowing that you, whoever's listening to this or seeing this or witnessing it, is getting your own blessing from this. So that's the intention. Not only is Ric and I move our own soul's progression up and dial it up, our luminosity up. We are absolutely holding and knowing for you that you also are dialing up your own luminosity as you receive something from this that hopefully will be making your tail wag, will be unexpected and absolutely inspiring to you. So thank you for joining me, Ric, to take the time out to do this.
And I'm delighted that you would invite me, Martha. I've watched a few of these that you've done, and I've met some of these people now in the minister uplift calls, and it's a rich fraternity or sorority to be a part of. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Well, as I've often asked the question, and you may have heard that in some of the other times together, Ric, if these messages, whatever you and I are putting out today, which are absolutely an offering, so after today, it is like belongs on the winds of God or the winds of life or the winds of wind, so that the seeds will be sown wherever they go. So you and I have done our part here, and then whatever becomes of it becomes of it. So if people are going to be hearing this message that you and I are bringing forth today, 2,000 years, what message would you want humanity to have? What would be the one takeaway you'd want, regardless of what they hear, you'd want to
Mhm.
convey?
So I'm going to go back to the thing that I believe that I learned first in New Thought that was startling, and it's more appropriate now than it was 45 years ago when I first heard it. That we have the power to choose how we experience an experience, including and perhaps more poignant than ever this pandemic. Is it heaven or hell? Well, both. You get to decide. So if I could give one teaching to somebody, we have the power to choose. The way we do it is we change the way we think, we awaken, we take an honest look at ourselves, we take an honest look without the fantasy filters on. I call it pink merry-go-rounds and purple ponies, right? In Unity, we often want to leapfrog to everything is good. Well, it's not good. We're living in a doggone pandemic. Now, that being said, what is my experience of it? And I have found it to be a rich time for me to do some serious journaling, to do some, I'm a student of the School for the Work, to do some worksheets that I have been pushing aside for a while, to look at what's going on here. And that shows up in me. I'm a better pastor. As the clearer I am, I'm the better pastor. So everybody, you've got the power to choose. The ball is in your court. Take advantage of the tools. And when Martha says that she's here to help those, to serve those who serve, I have seen it now for about 15 years, up close and personal. So spread it, share it, watch it again. I do it all the time. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's my big teaching, I think.
Thank you, honey. I ask usually coming into these gatherings, these mentoring moments, for two words or so that would be a framework for what we're going to present here. And today the words were, just as I was waiting for you to come in, was divine presence. Divine
Mhm.
presence. So I can say, Ric, that of all the people I've met, of the thousands and thousands of friends I have, and multitudes, hundreds of thousands of people I've met over time, traveling around, that your pastoring heart, your heart of a pastor, is as prevalent and noticeable as in anybody's that I've ever met. And
Mhm.
that represents to me a divine presence, that you're not only speaking God, teaching God, that you're living from a presence of I am being God's presence for people. I know that you have a particular affinity and great mastery and skill at being with people in end of life and doing memorials and things. And you're one of the very first people I ever met that said it's one of your favorite things to do: funerals, memorials, and being there for folks. And you put yourself out there in a way um, to do that. And it served so many families, no telling how many hundreds of thousands of people you've served because of your fulfilling of that calling. So
Mhm.
I'd love to hear from you then what you think about divine presence. How would you describe that? What does it mean to you, those two words? And then to go into a little bit about this calling that you have and the way that you're serving people, especially this year and especially now through the transition of life, death, dying, memorializing lives, celebrations of life, and being there for families in those times.
So that's a powerful question for me. I'm going to start by explaining how I got so committed to funerals. The very first funeral I ever officiated, long before I even thought of myself as a minister, was for my very youngest brother, Eric, who I found dead in his apartment. And I went with my stepmother to plan the service. And the funeral director asked her if anybody was going to eulogize him. And she didn't know what to say because they're none of them part of a church anywhere. And I said, I'll do it. And she looked at me and then looked at the funeral director, and she said to the woman, "Can he do that?" She said, "Yes, he can." And I came away from that experience of officiating my brother's memorial service, um, strongly convicted that it was going to be a big part of my ultimate ministry, because here's my family. And everybody turned around and looked at me and said, "I've never heard a funeral like that." Took me back to a time when a friend of mine's partner, back in the AIDS pandemic, had died. The family hired their minister, who got up in front of the group of people and said, "It's too late for John, but it's not too late for you. Get right with Jesus now." I got up and I left. I asked a funeral. I've done more than 400 funerals and memorial services in the last 20 years. And I and people have joined Unity of Royal Oak because they met me at a funeral. I believe that everybody deserves someone to speak for them in death. Um, and what I do and what I love to do, and a couple of funeral directors have noticed it. I've said, why do you call me? He said, "Because two reasons. You meet families where they are, not where you are. And where I am theologically is none of anybody's business, right? I'm there to bring some words that might inspire or bring hope or comfort or closure or tears or whatever." And he said, "Because I love the way you work with families. I love to go out with my laptop, sit down, everybody in a circle." Now, in this pandemic, it's been very different because I've been doing funerals, standing around an open grave, right? Many this summer I did. In our community, we had 3 deaths, and 2 of those I streamed, and the other one was streamed by somebody else. So, how do we pivot? But the need is still there. And I have a niece who's now a funeral director. She's just finishing up her last part of her apprenticeship. But we love to serve. We've worked together many times. I love it because people right then are at their most open and raw and real. And I value authenticity and integrity more than any other things. And you don't get much more authentic when you've walked with someone as their mama died, as their daddy died, as a child died, as a baby died. And I did a funeral for a baby, 6 weeks old, a few years ago. And I wasn't prepared. I walked in, I knew intellectually, but here was this casket this big on a table. I'm crying. I turned around and I said, "Okay, we're all going to cry today. So just so you know it." But that family was served, right? And I come away and then I get the notes back. Like, that was amazing. So can we, for me, it's about, can I meet a person where they are, open-hearted, honest, and hug them? And if I can't hug them, give them a virtual hug like
Yeah.
we are now. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's important to say that because we heard just this past week, and we've been hearing it off and on this year, that some people are going to be preferring virtual funerals. Even after we're able to join and meet again, there'll be people wanting to do that. And there's a growing number of people that want to have their memorials, their celebrations of life done virtually, which makes people in other cities, other states, other countries, people that cannot travel, won't travel, to come to make it a part of it. And I had the privilege of serving in a memorializing of a life, a celebration of life for a friend's father. It was fantastic. It was beautiful. And it's like this girl, this young woman, was meeting her father for the first time because the people that were on the call were able to speak. They were able to share just a little 1 minute story, how they met, how I know your father, what he did for me, and these things that a man existed now in death that did not exist prior to his death,
Yes.
because she had not known these people. She had no idea how many lives he had touched, how he had been serving, and all of this. So I think it holds a real potential as we can open our minds to that it's not less of a funeral or less of a celebration or anything because it's done virtually, and that we stay open-minded enough to accept this virtual world and this technology and all that as an addition, as a blessing, and as a new possibility for some, that it extends our reach to families, and that extends our reach to the grieving and to the loss and
Mhm.
to the lost, and to people that are want to be a part of it and have no other means to do that.
It's the truth. And the costs of funerals and things we all know are going way up, and then travel on top of it. So now we have, it's one of the, I counted a blessing of this pandemic too. It's not either or, it's both and, in person, virtual, hybrid. That's everything that I'm about right now. All my thinking is to be hybrid, because what I've noticed, I reach people in a funeral or a memorial who are not necessarily churched, right? I think the current stat is 53 or 54% of Americans do not claim any denominational or religious affiliation. So that's why guys like me who are willing to do, I can be unity 100%. I can go my Unibaptist over here a little minute. I'm versatile, I can be versatile with it. And it's a way to reach the people who are not churched. I've had many people say, I've never heard a preacher, a minister like you. What kind of thing is that? And so now for the last several years, I introduce myself. I'm Reverend Ric Beattie. I'm the pastor at Unity Church of Royal Oak, and this is our address. And I can't have cards with me because every single time for years somebody asks a card, and then they call me. Or three ladies have called me to say, "You did my dad's service. I want you to do mine." I said, "Well, let's hope that I outlive you, honey. That's all. Yeah.
Mhm. Well, yeah, I usually say, well, tell your family because it'll be after you're dead, your family owns you.
That's
So, and to a degree while you're alive. So
yeah,
be prepared that your funeral may not go the way that you have in mind too, and certainly put in place everything that you can.
exactly.
So, what would you say to folks, Rick, about their end of life, about preparing for this, about what you witness in families, that may ease it a little bit, that we can't stop pain, suffering, and all that, but there's absolutely things we can do as the living that makes it a little easier on families
Yes.
when the time comes for death and when we do transition. So what tips would you offer for
So, so,
people while we're living to make it a little easier maybe?
so first of all, have your documents and things organized somewhere. Do some basic stuff. Have your birth certificate and passports and all that stuff. Some sense of get your paperwork in order, and make some kind of an end of life plan for yourself. It doesn't have to be a big, huge thing. It'd be a very simple will. Doesn't cost a lot of money. You can get a kit from Susie Orman to do it yourself. Get it notarized. Let people know where it is. If you have an attorney, let your family know. So the person, as you're coming into your end of life, and I've already been thinking about my digital life, what will happen to that? So my niece, Ashley, who's a nerdier than me, a geek, she'll have access to all that. I don't care particularly what she does with it. Delete it, shred it, whatever. But don't just let it, because it'll live beyond me. That's one thing. But the more important one is be willing to have what in some families is a difficult conversation. I tell people and I tell families, there's only one way off of this rock. We are all going to die, right? We're born, you may be alive, pinch yourself, you might be living, and surely someday you will die. It's not a question of if you will, it's a question of when. Um, So talk about what you might like to have at a service. My mother was vehement. I don't want anybody looking at me. Good, Mama. So are you good with cremation? Yes. All right. Can I do a memorial service? Yes. So be willing, and they're tearful, but and have the conversations so that you know some of the things. Ask about your family history because so many families are spread out all around the country. We don't have the conversations at grandma's kitchen table where we learn about that. So write some of that stuff down, and then if you want a big elaborate funeral, find a way to pay for it. Don't leave it as a burden on your family. Be do not try to make up in death for what you didn't do alive. I tell families that all the time. You weren't close to your mother? Do not spend $20,000 now. That will not make you closer to your mother. That will make you closer to the poorhouse, right? So to be realistic, I ask families to be realistic. Until a few years ago, you typically were in your church. You had your preacher did something. The ladies would have a little lunch, and everybody go home. Well, now it's become an industry. Not against the industry, not against the professionals, but be sensitive to that. Everything that you're getting from them costs money. So, and it doesn't have to. That's the thing I often tell families: you don't have to spend this kind of money. You know.
Yeah, that's such good advice. I was so extreme in this, even as an early age. I took myself to a funeral home and asked the funeral director, "Can I have the form that you would fill out if I was in here with a dead family member on my hand?" And he said, "Do you have a dead family member on your hand?" And I said, "I do not, but I'm preparing myself for that." So he was like, "Would you want me to fill out the form?" I said, "I do not. I want you to give me the blank form. That's all I'm here for is a form." And I took the form and multiplied it times 6, copied it, and sat with my immediate family and asked them the questions.
Love it.
What is it you want? What do you want to wear? Do you want an open casket? Do you want cremation? Who do you want to carry you? Pallbearers, music. What music?
Mhm.
So, and I updated, and they were like, "This is the strangest thing in the world." And I'm like, "It is the strange, but guess who this will be on one day? Guess who, as the oldest of youngest and the oldest in the family and the bossy, get her done kind of whatever, this is going to be on my plate,
Yeah.
likely, if I outlive you." So these are things that I don't want to be tormenting me that day when there's already plenty of loss and grief and shame. So
Martha,
these things are available now.
had you asked your mother those questions?
Of course, several times, because I asked at a young age, and then I would pull those forms out every few years and ask them again
Yeah.
to see, is this still the same for you?
Yeah.
Is this what you still want? So I did periodic updates with that, and I still have that on file for my other family members. And it came in very handy when my mother, my father, and my baby brother were
Yeah.
dead, having all that information gathered, as well as family history and somewhat of a skeleton obituary and other things like that, things that you don't want to talk about. And I realize that some people can't. It is absolutely too frightening, too morbid, too whatever. So be gentle with yourself as you go into this. If some of you do this, and be gentle with family members, that there'll be some that just can't do it. So you'll have to get much more creative about asking them where they stand on
It's
some of this.
and it's all about the ask, right? I've learned that I can talk to most people about most things if I'm not trying to make their current position wrong, and if I'm not trying to change their mind, right? Just let's talk. You don't want to talk about, and sometimes people, like people in my community might to have me come to, maybe it's a conversation we have when a person's convalescing or they're in the hospital or they're in a nursing home and they're coming to the end of things. And so uh, I'd love to have people who are still alive help me plan their funerals. I've done it many times. I also realize that not every minister has the stomach for that,
Yeah.
but I do. I'm really clear. And I think it's because of our teachings. Um, I believe that there is life beyond the life of this suit of clothes. I don't pretend to tell people what that looks like. I don't know. What I know is that every one of the world's great religious traditions, teach that there's more to us than this. Yoda said it best. Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter, right? So if I embody that, if I live from that, and I look at what I'm doing with this family as service, And ministry is service, period. That's all of it. Um, how can I help guide them through that journey? And then I learn too, and I get better at asking the questions, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. And if they're, and I think you're so onto something, honey, that if the questions are naturally going to challenge them, because some of them don't know the answers, which is giving them some space to think about it, to contemplate, or leave the form with them, let them fill it out in
Mhm.
their own time. And for me, I simply said, I'm really clear that none of you want to do this. I'm really clear that this is all for me. So it would be very supportive of you to just go along with me. I think we can do this in about 10 minutes for everybody. So the pain won't last.
Right.
And if you can just kind of suck it up here and bear with me, I'll ask these as heartfully as I can and as quickly as I can to give me some kind of skeleton, which could ease this.
Yeah,
So,
sure. Yep.
um, what's your response to divine presence? What do you say about that, Rick? Or what do you believe it is?
Divine presence, I think of that, and it has evolved for me a lot over the years. I used to think of the divine presence. My Catholic background taught me that it was in the consecrated host, right? Which was in the monstrance, this big sun ray thing, and there was the Christ there. So it's a big journey from something there I could touch, an abstraction, Father, Son, Holy Ghost kind of a thing, to more like, I think of the divine presence as the undercurrent of life itself, pouring itself into um, expression like a river running down a mountain to the ocean. It's messy sometimes. Rocks get pulled, some gets at whatever. It isn't. For me, it's the underpinnings, the energy. One time, about 5 6 years ago, I had been listening to Eckhart Tolle's book, A New Earth. It's one of the few books that I've probably read or listened to 10 times, 10 or more. Still, it's still fresh. And I was walking down the trailhead near me, and he had been talking about bodies, pain bodies and emotional bodies and all this. And that was kind of a new teaching for me. I'd never delved into that. And I'm walking down the path this particular day, and I wasn't listening to the book that day. I just was listening to the birds, and I became aware of a shimmer. All I can describe it as a shimmer in the trees, just like a shimmer, like something not quite visible, almost visible. And then I became aware that that same shimmer was on the path that I was walking on, and and the rocks next to the path, and then the water, because I was walking next to the Clinton River, in a place where the trees grow ahead over an old train track. So it's like a cathedral, and I was profoundly hushed. And I followed that along for about 6 or 7 minutes, and then it was gone. Martha, I tried the rest of the year to recreate that experience. I walked in the same place. I listened. I mean, it didn't happen. But the following year, something similar happened to me. And then I've had similar experiences. One of them in the cemetery um, in Loretto, at the Loretto Mother House. You know that I was very taken there. Something happened there. So I'm aware that life is beyond the intellect, beyond the for me, beyond the notion of Yoda or a super being or a super mama or Big Daddy or any of that. It's the restlessness of life exploring itself. And Eckhart Tolle made a statement that just about dropped me to my knees in his book the first time I read it. He said, "We are consciousness becoming conscious of itself." And so that's what I think about the divine presence. It's in all of us, it's in everything. That's why I'm enamored with Richard Rohr's work on the universal Christ. He says, Christ wasn't Jesus, it's all of it, right? Everything. Same concept. Yeah.
Yeah. And we were talking about that. So if you're hearing this later, Rick and I will be in a year-long process of how to bring this divine presence, a Christed consciousness, an elevated consciousness into our living, into actionable items, actionable tracking. And on the front of my teacher's manual, it says, and I meant to put this forward in our earlier work today, Rick, how a forgotten reality can change everything.
Yes. Yes.
How a forgotten reality can change everything we see,
Mhm,
shimmery,
mhm,
everything we hope for,
mhm.
to reawaken the dreams of our hearts, the innate, inherent qualities that we have. In an interview with Lynn McTaggart, she said people need to get off themselves. They're
Amen.
so about what I can do and what I can get, and I and I and I, and it's like they're not thinking about what have I done for anybody else lately.
Right.
And one example was somebody that was praying and intending to get a certain job, and it didn't. The group held an intention for her, and then the job didn't come. And I said, how would you respond to that? And she said, I tell her to go help other people get jobs.
Yes.
Sister, yeah, preach it.
And there's the law of circulation, isn't it? Give it, give it first.
Whatever you think you're lacking.
Yes, give it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how a forgotten reality can change everything we see, everything we hope for and believe. So as you know, as you referred to the work, Rick referred to that earlier, it's thework.com. It's free and out there for anybody who wants to check that out. And it's been beneficial to me in so many ways, including to look at what I actually believe,
Mhm.
not what I'm touting that I believe or claiming that I believe, but to look at what I actually believe. And boy, talk about a forgotten reality.
Yeah.
There it is. So
One of the most, my 10 years ago, I attended the 9-day intensive school for the work. It was one of three things in my life that has transformed me more than any other thing. And I find the work alive in me. I don't often do it with people. I don't often actually do a worksheet, but it it is the solid place that I go to. And then particularly because I love the way you teach and use the work. So I remember visiting with you in just outside of Toledo, Ohio, a few years ago, I think 5 years ago, and you were down there doing a teaching, and I thought, oh my God, I've been doing this stuff for 5 years. It's like I never heard these concepts before. But it's why I think I am so committed to my own soul evolution, my soul's growth, finding the places that I'm stuck. I've drawn around me people that I trust, people like you. Um, I've shared things with you I've never shared with another human being, right? We all have to have that. And the thing that I've learned, because even the letting go of 130 pounds, one size does not fit all, not in diets, not in spiritual journeys, right? Find what works for you. And if it isn't working for you, don't do it. Do something different, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
I was in preparing for some of these January launches, and as part of the preparation was that, like some of this goal setting, there'll be the most goal sets and the intentions and resolutions and all that. And it's like until these filters are run through that, like, do I actually want this?
Right.
Do I actually, is it true that I really want this? It's going to be just more blah 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 for for this first. So more delusion to ourselves, more even abandonment, a spiritual abandonment of ourselves to claim and pretend that we want something that we don't really want, and that we're not going to devote some time and attention to, or to put a practice into a devotional practice
Mm-hmm.
in place to move us in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
come and join us, friends. MarthaCreek.com, all sorts of classes and teachings, workshops available to anybody. Doesn't matter what you believe or what you call it. We're about, I'm about being about whatever you're about. So that's what I'm here to do. So Rick, let people know how to reach you, your church website, anything you want to put up here for the
Our
record.
website is www.unityofroyaloak.org. We're also on Facebook and YouTube. We stream. We have found ways to pivot. In fact, that's the new buzzword of this pandemic for me. And I've been pivoting so much, I feel like a ballerina lately. And you can get in touch with me. Email address is rick, R-I-C, at unityofroyaloak.org. If you want my honest opinion of Martha Creek, here it is. Amazing, amazing woman. I watch people closely. I've worked with big names in the past, and I watch them closely. I've never found a crack in you, Martha. That's why I'm still here. Amen.
Thank you, Rick. Um, Somebody told me once, don't tell me I'm amazing if you don't tell me why.
Why are you amazing? Because you do the work that you call others to do. That's what is amazing. You plumb the depths. I've known you a long time. Year to year, I see the change in you, the evolution in your teaching. It's still relevant. I've invested in programs with you, rich returns from them, but it's because I've said it to you before, because you're authentic. You're who you are. You're not just, it's not just some theory. It's not like, well, learn the 12 powers and the 5 principles and you're good, right? No. How do we do this? How do we live it? How can we be this? Because
Yeah.
until someone's being it, Jesus awoke to the Christ in him for some reason. Who knew? Who knows? Who cares? I don't know why. It happened. It happened. And I've seen it happen in myself and in you and many other people, right? What if we just embrace the concept that it's possible for us to become enlightened, to be better, to be different, to stop being victims to life, right?
Yeah. So amen, amen, amen. So it's funny that I thought you had already told me how I'm amazing, and then I get another ambush of that. So I hope you'll listen to the little mentoring with Martha moment and this podcast, as I hope other people will and do, and send it on to somebody that may be inspired by this, or somebody that could be uplifted knowing that there's pastors out there that care for you and that can meet you and your family wherever you are at the time of death, and that there's practical things you can do, and that there's somebody that knows and believes and holds with you the potential of an elevated consciousness through our practices and through our application of living out the I am, if
Yeah.
whatever that means to you. Thank you. Blessings to you always, honey. And I'll see you in our journeys.
Love you, love you. See you soon.
MarthaCreek.com if I can support you. Blessings.